Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at the defense of Procyon 3, which is a competitive, solo, and cooperative kind of Euro-ish war game. And a quick disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this one. This game's got asymmetric factions and strategic wargame play, which means it should be a hit for me. Did it work out that way? Let's find out and get to the list. First, in my number 5, I have a full-on con, which is the fiddliness of the game in some cases, and also the need for errata for the solo. So first, in the fiddliness, this is a gigantic game with huge boards, faction mats, cards, tokens, all this stuff, tons of miniatures. It's a lot to deal with, but especially when you look at the space battle half of things, because there's a space battle and a ground battle, there are tons of tokens, shields to show how much bonus these units are giving to other units in terms of defense, spores to show how close the human ships are to being destroyed. It's a lot to count, a lot to deal with, just a bit annoying. And then on top of that, the solo rules aren't as clear as I would like. Some of the examples had incorrect information in them. There was one potentially broken rule that I discovered that they've now since fixed, and that's the positive side of this. They are responding, so if you go and track down the FAQ and the errata, you should be good to go, but just the fact that they needed them is a little bit of a bummer. As for my number 4, I'm going up to a mix, and this is looking at the scenario variety. So first of all, within the main scenario, there is some variety. The Automa will focus on different sides of the board, so you'll need to kind of react to that, and sometimes battles will go better or worse for you. So there is variety within the same play, but at the same time, I think some people will find the core gameplay a bit samey, especially when you play it multiple times, in that you can only play as the humans. There is no solo Automa for playing with the alien side, unfortunately, and the sort of scope and movement of the defense can follow similar patterns. Now, that being said, I did find the game consistently fun, and they do have multiple scenarios in the box that do change things up in appreciable ways. It's not going to be an entirely new experience, but I think it is enough to give the game some good value. But for my number 3, I'm at a full-on pro, and I'm looking at a different type of variety, which is the faction variety, and specifically how they connect to each other. So first of all, the 4 factions, the 2 human ones you control, and the 2 alien ones. On the negative side, they do have very different rules. They even have entirely different rule books. So I guess that doesn't quite bring it down to a mix, but it is a hindrance to the player. Having to learn the game can be a bit of a beast. But with that out of the way, each of the factions has different tricks. Each of them has different ways to power up. Each of them has different types of units. I find that all very exciting since I enjoy asymmetric things in games. But the coolest thing for me is how they interact with each other, especially between the space battle and the ground battle. You can bombard from space. You can send reinforcements from space. The enemy does the exact same thing. And sometimes you will send things up from the ground. So I just really think it's kind of cool how these 4 factions work with each other, which is especially nice in co-op where you talk to each other and each play one of the different factions. But even in solo, it's really cool mechanically. And my number 2 is also a pro that's focused on the Automa, the AI you play against. Now, I mentioned the errata. There are some things they had to clean up, but with those in place, I love how these AI work because they are very, very predictable. Once you play the game a few times, you'll start to see kind of what their priorities are and how they tend to move in both spheres of the combat. But on top of that, what I love most is that you can see what they're probably going to do next. In the ground game, you have a row of 3 cards, and you know they're going to use 2 of them, so you have a very good idea of where they'll attack and what they'll be doing. And similarly, in the space game, you can see how many ships they'll activate. You can even control that with some of your actions. So it's a great mix of predictability and randomness for the solo and co-op player, making it feel like a puzzle, but not one you can perfectly solve. And finally, my number 1, also a pro, is the action card play. For both of the human factions, you have these really interesting action cards, and they have multiple uses, which I love. For the humans, you play 1 card a turn to activate one of your heroes and get some super benefit, but then you discard other cards to get activations for your units, like moving and attacking. That's already pretty cool, and then the space deck is even more interesting because some of the cards become your combat cards and determine how much damage you can deal, but the better combat cards also give you more activations. You also have powers on those you can activate. Now, the one negative for that in the space battle is that if you get a really bad draw early, there's nothing to really help you out, and you can get into a hole too quickly. But besides that one concern, I think the action cards are great, and I love the multiple uses they give you. So overall, I think I can recommend the Defense of Procyon 3 to war gamers, people who like coin games, or getting to a lighter side of things, people who enjoy Root, who aren't afraid to kind of dig through a few different rule sets to figure out how things go and like the interactions between factions. On the other hand, you might want to avoid this one if you don't like sprawling games with a lot to manage, or if you're looking for quicker, simpler, more random games, this one has a very epic feeling and mostly feels pretty deterministic in a lot of the actions you take. And if you'd like to see the game in action, click the link that just popped up. I have a full playthrough, although it is where I found the exploit that was fixed with the errata, so just be aware that it's going to be a little bit goofy if you watch some of it. Good gaming, everyone, and I'll see you at the next stop.